Jordan, man, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you on finally. We got you on, and I know you and I have talked before. I don't know, about 6 months to a year ago, somewhere, and then when I was working in South Carolina next to Mr. Davis. But man, we're excited to learn more about you and get you on the show. So just to begin with, who are you? What do you do, and where are you from?
Yeah, no, thank you guys. It's an honor to be here. You guys are, making waves in this space. So honored to be here and chat with you. And so, like you said, my name's Jordan Simon. I grew up working in my family's plumbing business back in West Virginia. And doing that in high school and college, I knew I never wanted to be a plumber. At least that's what I thought. So went to school, actually went to grad school, and moved down here to North Carolina and kind of found that ideal job that, we're kind of told to strive for, right? So worked in corporate finance for better part of like 6 years. And then, was having conversations with my dad, and they were at a place in their life where they were wanting to retire, and it kind of made sense, and it was a unique opportunity to step back in, kind of help retire them, but also grow this business where I'd worked as a kid and knew a lot of the people there and was able to invest back into the community. So, that was in 2020. So it was good timing to step into a business. But, it worked out because, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But, from there took that, just kind of family plumbing business. And now we've branched into several locations doing plumbing, HVAC, and electrical. Ended up
Awesome.
helping a local supplier. So it's kind of grown into a conglomerate of a few smaller businesses. And it's been exciting, man, to just, really be able to pour back into that industry and just be involved and get out of the cubicle. So
Yeah, that's cool. Jordan, you mentioned it. You talked about how you started, but what were those first few days like? Because you said you kind of learned, all right, I don't want to be a plumber at least, but what were those first few days like going to the job site? What were the feelings like?
I can remember the first job I went to, and even, for that whole summer, I think I was 15 and I was turning 16 that year, because I know the second part of the summer I was able to drive to work. And it was exciting to kind of like learn, but then at the same time I kind of felt like this pressure of like, well, I don't know exactly what I'm doing, like, right? We all have that whenever we start something new where we're not an expert at it, so there's some hesitancy. But getting thrown in like that, you can learn a lot. And I think that's one thing that, people, especially young kids nowadays, it's like they struggle with that hesitancy of like, why would I want to get into this? I don't know anything about it. My counselor, maybe my parents are telling me to do other things. And it's like, you can learn so much, even if it's just to later be able to do things around your house. It's a powerful thing to be able to learn how to do some things with your hands.
I think that, Walker, if you don't mind me cutting in,
Go for it.
I think that is a really good, I would say synopsis, but that's not the right word. I'm having a hard time figuring out the right word, but just understanding because this next generation is very hesitant. Like I
Mhm.
think about still some of the stuff now. I know I don't have all the construction knowledge, and so one of my cheat codes, quote unquote, is really just going and trying to partner with that foreman that's in the trades that knows what he's doing. But for so many of us, if you don't have that resource, being willing to take that step, like going and being a plumber maybe in high school and learning, it's a big step, right? And so it's cool that you got that experience. And I don't know, I just like how you laid that out because I would encourage anyone. It's one of the biggest pieces of advice I've gotten from a superintendent. It was my first internship with Brasford Gorey. It's a company I work for now, Jordan. And he told me, Davis, there's nothing you can't mess up. He didn't say messed up. He said a different word, but he's like, we can fix anything, no matter what you do. What's important is you come and tell me, and we learn from it, right? Don't make it again. But just having that someone as your supervisor telling you, hey, you can mess up, learn from it, and let's keep moving forward. It's big. So for the younger generation, you talked about that. They're hesitant. What would be some of the maybe words of wisdom in that realm along that line?
No, I think you hit on it really well there. That freedom of trial and error is powerful. That freedom of expression, that freedom of, hey, I can be vulnerable here and it's okay.
Right.
And it's something that I've really tried to transition the way I think about it too. And, because we talk a lot about, well, this generation doesn't want to do this work, or, they're being guided to other places. But part of that is there are people that want to do it, and maybe they don't know how to get into it. And I think this is where you guys are filling a good gap. Is like, hey, let me take you to the next level in that industry. But so one of the things I've been focused on is like, hey, let's try and find those people that are willing to get in there and learn, that have the right attitude, that show some aptitude for being handy, but then give them a space that they are free to try those things out. And hey, and if you find out that it's not for you, that's okay. But I think it
Yeah.
really starts from the organizations that we have in our communities, and that's one of the things I talk to other business owners about is, when we're thinking about recruiting or we're thinking about hiring the next person, let's not only focus on the skills, but what's actually going to build our team and our culture kind of long term. So to answer the question, that was long winded, but my advice would just be for those kids, like if you show initiative or you show interest, you're going to stand out because that field is so hard right now to hire in. If you have interest in it, it'd be pretty easy to stand out amongst your peers.
Yeah. And before we move on, Jordan, how old are you?
32.
And so growing up, as your dad owned a plumbing business, was he kind of the similar thread of, hey, it's okay to mess up? Was that something that was taught in your life?
I guess not explicitly stated, but yeah, and I use that same mindset now. And I'll tell people like, there's nothing you can do that we can't. I mean, there are some things, but like that freedom to try things out and know that I will be okay. I'd much rather you try something and make a mistake than sit and do nothing.
Right.
I don't know if there's a word for that, but I do think that my dad was, and as I've gotten older, realized a much more influential piece in my just regular life, but specifically in business than I originally thought. But no, it was like, hey, get in there and try it. That's way more valuable than, making sure that you're doing it right. And it's
Right.
translated into other things, like, right, like we were talking before about podcasting. It's like you can sit
Mhm.
there and wait for perfect timing in anything you're doing, and that day is
Right.
never going to come. You learn
Right.
so much more by just jumping in and doing it because your first ones are going to suck anyway, no matter what you
Mhm.
do.
Right.
It's
I
exactly
agree.
what Johnny Green said back in the day. You both pointed out to exactly right. He said, I can fix the wrong decision, but I can't fix indecision." Right. So if you don't
Yeah.
make a choice, you can't fix that. By the time you do something, it could be too late. Right. But if you do something, you do it wrong, it can get fixed no matter what it is. But Jordan or Davis, did you have something before we?
No, I mean, I was just trying. I mean, if we back up and think, maybe it's just because the older generation now has the experience and so they know. And maybe as whenever I get older, that's going to be the same way. But you just see the older generation and they're just it's direct and they
Mhm.
understand what to do and they're not willing, even if they don't know something, they're willing to take the risk. And so I think it's important as we focus on the younger generation, let's help them understand you don't have to be hesitant. I get it. It's nerve wracking. Our world's filled with anxiety, and I think that's a lot of it. But how can we help them understand that go make mistakes, take initiative, learn from it, and just keep moving forward? You're going to get there, right? It's okay to mess up. It's perfectly fine.
Well, I think that mindset transcends beyond just working in the field with your hands or in your job. Like we see so much curated lifestyle thrown at us all the time that it seems like we're not allowed to be imperfect. And I think that, finding environments that allow you to understand like who you are as a
Mm,
person and what you're good
That's
at
good.
is really the most important thing. So,
That's good.
that's what I would recommend people focus on is finding the right fit for you. It may not be, your forever career, but if you can get that mindset going in the right direction early on, then it'll set you on a much better path.
That's so good. Jordan, we brushed on it a little bit throughout this conversation, right? It was really more related to the construction industry as a whole. And we talked about it's hard to find talent. It's hard to find good talent, right? And the more that we progress as a construction industry, it's getting harder and harder because the more people are retiring than are coming in, right? And it's you gotten into this mindset nowadays with everyone that construction is your last choice. It's just as hammering a nail, it's dirty. No one wants to do it, right? You can't if you're smart, you shouldn't be in construction. You got all these different sort of mindsets that people have about it just because we've done such a poor job as an industry of advertising it and getting people in there. So what would you say has been the worst job that the industry of construction has done in terms of making itself known? And what do you think is the best way to kind of turn that around and start getting the interest of high schoolers, of college, of people who are looking for a career change and never even thought about the construction industry?
Well, I think that you guys are, laying foundations is a perfect example of the right things to do, whether it be those classroom talks that you guys do, or just being that social media influence that shows what's possible. But to back up and think about the negative, I think it's just, and I don't think it was intentional. I think that it's of their time, whether it was, when we think about the peak of the middle class and blue collar industry, I think that trained a lot of those older technicians. At least I'll talk about it from my perspective and in our space. A lot of those technicians were kind of like, hey, if you have the information, you have the know-how, that's where the power is. So when you
Mhm.
start to share that, it's easy to get replaced.
Mm.
So it created this system of, well, I'm going to keep the information to myself. I don't want to teach somebody else because that person could then take my job. And it was
Interesting.
it's kind of a scarcity mindset, right?
Right.
And then I think it was just good marketing on behalf of colleges, and they were kind of
Government.
fiscally motivated to get as many kids there as possible. And
Right.
our generation has kind of bared the brunt of that, where we see now that we have this crippling amount of debt and maybe are in careers that we didn't really want, or just not really fulfilled in what we're doing because we did this path for someone else. So I think it's just exposing, for the kids' sake, it's being exposed to that information. But for us, it's making sure that those kids have something to be exposed to, right? So getting in front of them, showing them through, conversations like this that, hey, you can work in the field, you can have a podcast, you can do all these different things, and it's all from within that one industry. I think it's just highlighting it and kind of bringing the sexy back, is what I like to say. Is we got to make it cool, and I don't know the best way to do that. I think that we have to kind of do it in our own voice, but as soon as we can make it sexy again, then I think that kids will understand that, you know, there's real longevity and success that can be found here.
I think that's awesome because you laid that out well because again, comparing the old guard to the new guard now, you're right. I can think back to a conversation with a previous superintendent that's 65 that's working for B&G forever, and he was like, "Davis, when I started out and I was your age, there were 50 guys at the gate that wanted my job." So
Yep.
again, share or holding on to that knowledge and power was that, right? It's vastly important that I didn't tell the other guy how to be better than me. But nowadays, man, we got a list so long that we can't fill. You have to train, and if you don't train,
Mhm.
then you're doing it wrong. And I understand that it's hard for that old guard to teach that, and that really helps me understand my previous job a lot better now, thinking about it from your perspective. But I don't know, how can we share that? So I just think back, I'll go into it. My first year in construction is really tough. Was surrounded by a bunch of superintendents that were older. I didn't want to share a lot, that didn't want to teach me. And so it was a lot of just figuring it out, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, just figuring it out. But I just felt I was so limited at that job site because these guys, one, didn't know my role, but then two, they didn't understand, that I need them. I didn't grow up with a hammer and framing walls like they were when they were 5, 6 years old, right? Like they would talk about it, just the stuff they did, and I was just amazed. And anyway, to make a long story short, I think now, how do I encourage someone to continue to fight through that? Because I think there's still a lot of old people that have a lot to give. It's just, how can you look past that and understand they may not have the best people skills, but they can teach you something, whether it's right or wrong. But you have to be willing to lead up to that person and try to get that knowledge from them. Because if you don't, you're going to probably get burnt out, or you're not going to have the knowledge that you really need, because that person, again, that's been in the industry forever, he could tell you everything about what to do and what not to do.
No, I think it starts with leadership, and I don't mean leadership in the terms of the owner of a company or a position at a organization, right? Leadership can come from anywhere, and I think that setting that example of, it's important to transition this knowledge. It's important to get other people excited about the work that we're doing is powerful. And you got to think that it's going to be tough going to change a status quo that's been in place for 75 years at this
Right.
point. I mean,
Right.
because I can give an example of it, like in West Virginia, for example, where the businesses are located. A lot of the easiest path to get into, like, let's just say plumbing, was through the union, and that's another organization that's kind of they don't want that status quo change. They want to keep that control, and for their own reasons. I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily for, nefarious reasons or anything like that. But whenever I started to think about, hey, how do we train and get people excited? It's like, oh, well, I could just send people to like some sort of trade school, like a plumbing apprenticeship program within the state. One didn't exist. So how does an entire state say that, hey, we want you to get into this career, but there's no way for you to learn how. So I've tried to reach out to a couple trade schools that, could maybe partner with and help set this up, and to no avail. So I just started one that will allow people to do it remotely, partnered with the PHCC and their program to say, let's give people access to at least, some formal training that goes along with their on-the-job training. So I think it's just finding, and I guess that's an example of that leadership that I was talking about. I don't like to, brag on myself, but it's like someone's got to step up at some point to show people that it is important, regardless of what position you're in, but what we're doing is important, and it's going to be important for a long time.
So Jordan, go a little bit more into that, right? So with this trade school, first of all, I don't think many people are used to having a remote trade school, which is pretty cool.
Right.
Do you do at some point, do you do training on the job like for a week or something? And then a lot of it's just online, you learn the concepts, or talk a little bit about that for those who maybe are in the Carolinas and want to learn more about how they can get involved in it.
Yeah, and I think almost every state has it through. Like if you go to the phcc.org, you can find your local chapter that would set this up for you. But it's self-paced, which is nice, but someone at like your organization can help manage and check the boxes of like, hey, in accordance with this subject, did you do the field piece of it? So it's kind of like in collaboration with the work that you're already doing. And that's what I liked about it, was that self-paced piece of it, because it's intimidating for a lot of people, especially in this industry, that maybe don't read or write super well, to then try and get licensing, because that's one of the best ways that they can move up in both, their employment, but then also in pay. But the idea of taking a test for a lot of these guys is scary. So having this remote one that they can do in their own place at their own time and learn kind of what a test even looks like, I thought was really powerful.
Really cool.
That is. Like, I remember, I think it was Tyler Stankunas Walker that talked about, I'm not going to name the client he was working for, but Jordan, he's a concrete subcontractor, and he was going in to do the safety orientation in the trailer. And basically the GC was basically saying, these guys can't read and write. Like, I'm not going to let them be on my job site. And he was like, man, hold up, wait. Like, I can help. I can read these out to him. Like, let's figure something out. And he was like, I can put up safety pictographs and explain I'm here. Like, don't just create another barrier to entry, right? And so you talking about that's awesome.
Well, I mean, and we have guys like that too. It's like I can think of very good examples of guys that know about a boiler system more than anybody in a tri-state area, but it's like they can't write down what they used on the job. And it's like, okay, well then we set up a talk to text. Just tell the computer what you did. We'll figure it out.
Right.
But like, I just don't understand that mindset of like, they have to fit within my paradigm in order for them to work here or work with us. Like, we should be trying to get, the best minds and the best talent, regardless of what those other capabilities are.
It's a fish in its fishbowl, right? You're great at one thing. Everybody's great at it. It doesn't mean that, hey, that they were able to maybe finish high school and finish learning about English and literature, right? And why are we knocking that person? There's a verse in the Bible that I love that it talks about with Jesus. I'm not gonna get too deep, but basically, how you treat the least of these is going to be how I remember you, right? And so, if you treat the least of these like that, I mean, that just fires me up. When I see people on the job site that people treat as least of these, I'm the one that's going to go be the friend. I'm going to figure out how I can help them. I want to figure out a way that I can encourage them to keep on coming and keep on showing up in our industry.
Well, even when I first, took over, I wanted to explain to the guys that I really wanted an organizational structure that was an inverse pyramid, right? So that I'm here to support you. That's my job. Like there's not a hierarchy per se. Like, we have roles and everything, but the office staff, my job is to work for you and make sure that you're doing the hard work in the field. But whatever you need to make that job easier, whether it be through communicating with customers, through the technology piece of it, or whatever it is, that's where you use the resources available to you. Because, where I may be better at talking to a customer about a specific problem, or, it's usually complaints. You shouldn't have to deal with it. That's what I'm here for. So you focus on what you're good at, and I'll handle those other things.
You, that's the really cool part about construction is depending upon what company you're with, right? There are some companies that don't operate that way, and it's you do what I tell you to do, right? But the most successful companies are the ones who eliminate the most barriers to get the job done, right? So I just got married, and we're returning and getting new gifts from different stores, right? And I'll call the store out. I don't think they care. We're don't have millions of viewers, right? But Pottery Barn is horrible to deal with because they have so many barriers to get to the point of what you need to do. Like they can't give you a gift card in person; they give you an e-gift card. And if the email is wrong, like ours, it takes over a week to 3 weeks to get a card in the mail. You can't do this, you can't do that, right? It's so difficult to do the most basic of things. And for some construction companies, that's the same way. If they have rules, regulations, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, right? And at the end of the day, the workers are just kind of handcuffed. But if you are a company, like you say, who is just, hey, look, if this makes your job too difficult and it's not unsafe to eliminate it, then let's do it, right? Let's figure out a way to make your job easier. And I think that's the way that a lot of construction companies need to start going, because people aren't going to want to work for them if it's just like, hey, I can't really do my job anymore,
Well, yeah, and I don't think that it's always a conscious effort that they're trying to limit those barriers to entry, right?
Right.
Like, and not that you were implying it or whatever, but a lot of these business owners are also of that same cohort that we talked about earlier, right? So it may be that they just don't understand. Like they expect, because for the past 30 years, the way it's worked is they can set their business up the way they want. They can do the jobs they want. They can hire the people they want. And now all of a sudden that there's been a paradigm shift, and it's hard because part of what like my dad went through is like, he was not comfortable using technology to help scale the business. So he kind of maxed out what was possible with one guy in an office running his 6 crew. Like it was capped out, and it wasn't worth the effort to him to try to do and I don't blame people for that. I think what they need to understand is there's resources out there, and reaching out to those resources that can help you integrate different technologies, or different recruiting or different training programs. It's not, a failure on your part. If anything, it's you realizing that that's the next step forward and can really help scale your business. So I don't think it's intentional. You know what I mean? I think it's a lot of people are just kind of handcuffed by their own limitations.
Yeah. All right. So Jordan, you've added a ton of value already. I want to understand more about your background. You talked about you worked for your dad in the plumbing business. You went to graduate school and worked in corporate finance, and now you're helping your dad as he retired, and not a hectic year at all in 2020. So what are you doing now? I know you've mentioned some of it, but the way that I hear is like you're owning several different businesses, and it's all kind of coming into one. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, which my wife's super excited about, all these different businesses, all this stuff that I try and do. No, so I wanted to set it up, because it was back in like my hometown community, that I wanted to change the mindset where it's like, this is a great place to work. My dad, who used to teach me all these biblical things that didn't realize at the time, but I think about now, always said that a great name is better than great riches. And, we stick by that. So to me, it's important that we are truly adding value. We're taking care of people's most valuable asset in their home, right? So when we're in and out of their home, that's just a powerful thing. That's an interaction inside someone's personal space. It's taking care of, their livelihood for maybe them and their next generation. So I take the stewardship of that very seriously. And, so yes, the idea was scale this business up to help it be somewhat, self, running, which is the idea of every business owner. And it's a lot more difficult than it sounds on paper, or than your plan kind of in your mind works out. But for the most part, we have a lot of good people there. So my big thing was always, I just felt like I had more to give to other people, and that was kind of the impetus for me to say, I want to start this, my podcast, where I'm just, trying to find out how do we all get, 1% better? How do we get a little bit better all the time? Whether that be in, our personal lives, our business lives, you talk a lot about like the mental health aspect, all these things that people worry about and are concerned about, like let me talk to experts, and hopefully people can get, you know, a little bit of information that hopefully helps them. So for me right now, it's more about, you know, what can I give back? I know that's weird to say it at a young age, but it's like, you know, I also do a little bit of like consulting for other blue collar businesses that do struggle in the, hey, how do I incorporate, you know, different technologies, whether it be a field service management system or into my accounting system, and how's that tie into the CRM? Like all that's difficult for someone that just knew a trade and started a business because of it. But for someone that had the background of, hey, you know, I have a master's degree in accounting, it's a little bit easier for me to understand that side and then translate it to people.
That's cool.
And in my job at the, you know, my corporate job prior to this, it was in the operations kind of part of the finance. So it was taking a lot of complex ideas and breaking it down for like project managers, which has been, I didn't think about it at the time, but tremendously helpful. And, you know, whenever you're talking to current employees, future employees, homeowners, like how do we take your problem, solve for it, and then being able to put that into words for people is something that I feel like is just a passion of mine, and something that, you know, I feel like I'm decent at. So that's I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my background. And I don't know if I'm allowed to ask you guys questions, but
Yeah.
I feel like you guys are like on the forefront of, you know, what I follow from you is a lot of your interactions are with that next generation. So what are the things that you guys hear from them that are the biggest struggles? Like what is it that we as business owners are missing out on?